football show. He's Robbie Veno. I am Drew Martin. We will be joined by Ralph Michaels shortly. But Robbie at Rob Veno Sports, welcome in, man. How you feeling?
I am good today, buddy. How about yourself? We're surrounded by action here. It's almost once again like the when the NBA playoffs started, it felt like the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, the way they run games afternoon all the way through, about midnight here on the East Coast. And that's what we're going to get with Major League Baseball today with their new playoff system. 2 p.m. East, we're underway with playoff action and won't be done until late tonight. So we're going to get a lot of sports coverage here throughout the week. It's a busy time.
Yeah, I mean, what we got, NBA finals and MLB playoffs, middle of college football and NFL. I've never really seen anything like this. And I've been doing this as my straight job for 6 years now, Robbie. You've been doing it even longer than I have. Can you compare it to anything in the past?
Honestly, no. Not with the extension of NBA into, we're in late September now. Generally speaking, it's training camp and they're ready to start a new season in October. So you have that combined with baseball. I mean, they do generally cover each other slightly. As the World Series usually is, October, beginning of October, and NBA season, middle of October. But the way the whole thing has, laid out, Drew, with the playoffs and everything throughout the summer has been totally different. And so, like I say, we're never complaining that there's so many games because, hey, the more the odds maker puts up on the board for us, the happier we are. So that certainly is extra opportunity here, but it does keep you, you know, burning that candle pretty late at night trying to get
Yeah.
through all this research on all these different sports. But we got college football today and the return of the SEC last week. I know you had to be a happy guy with the performance of Auburn, especially fourth quarter. And we saw some things out of the SEC last week that were a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun to see him play, out the gate. Obviously Mike Leach kind of taking the cake, passing yards record in the SEC in his first performance here, KJ Costello. So it's really cool to see, that kind of offense get into the SEC. And you bring up Auburn looking good. I don't know if it's so much Auburn looking good or Kentucky not really living up to it. I guess we'll find out more this week. The Arkansas Georgia game right around the point spread. I felt like Arkansas was kind of the right bet there with Georgia not looking all that great, but we're going to find out more about that and the Deep South's oldest rivalry, which we'll talk about here, guys. And just a rundown for this show, we're going to do what we learned from this past week that we can take forward. We're also going to talk Texas A&M, Alabama, Auburn versus Georgia, and then what Navy versus Air Force, plus best bets as well. So, Robbie, did you want to throw out anything you learned from this past week that we can take forward as sports bettors?
Well, I think the progression of teams, right, Drew? I think immediately of a game I was involved with last week pretty heavily, Tulane and Southern Miss, and Willie Fritz's team goes crazy and scores 66 points against Southern Miss. Remember now that Southern Miss fired Jay Hobson after game one, and they're dealing with a 30-year-old head coach who comes from, I think, East Baptist High School in Texas, where he was an offensive mind. But Southern Miss has issues, Drew, pretty deep issues. And Tulane, that second half against Navy, and we'll talk Navy as you mentioned a little later, really must not have sat well with the team because there was no let up, and Willie Fritz went back to the ground game. I think they had over 400 yards rushing against Southern Miss. So I think that, what we learn in general is these teams are never as bad as they look early on, and they're never as good as they look early on. Things do change between game one, game two, game three. Then we get a little bit steadier four. So we might have a little better read on some of these teams. I'll say this, just personal editorial right here, because I've thought Bo Pelini stinks for a long time, and Bo Pelini really stinks. You talked about Mike Leach walking in and KJ Costello setting 600, a new passing record for SEC with over 600 yards in the game. Just put it into context for a half a second here. You've got Mississippi State converting to a brand new offense and a team that has never recruited to air raid until this past February, the first recruiting class Leach has ever had. Don't know how many true freshmen are going to make a big impact on Mississippi State. And he walks in with his transfer from Stanford, who plays power football at quarterback, and his leftovers from the previous regime, and immediately throws for 600 yards against Bo Pelini's defense. Now, we know Stingley, the top cornerback, was out for LSU, and we know LSU had a lot of graduation losses, but that is a defense full of five-star recruits. And Bo Pelini, I don't know, Drew. He gets a lot of recognition, a lot of hype still for, I'm maybe being generous here, but 10 years minimum of lousy coaching at Nebraska. I mean, he got away with it at Youngstown State for a couple of years in FCS, but he's no Dave Aranda. LSU's going to miss that guy, and I don't know how long Bo Pelini's going to be in the door at LSU. If Mississippi State can do that to him, can't wait to see what some others can do to him.
Yeah, that Mississippi State game was wild. And without further ado, we got Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. Ralph, welcome in, man.
You know, I tell my damn secretary to keep my schedule tighter and be on the show on time and make sure my camera's on and make sure the hookups are right. But, you know, it's just tough to find good help. So that's why I'll just blame it on myself, because I don't have a secretary, nor would I ever blame it on her. Hey, guys, sorry for the delay. And Robbie, I was looking something up while you were talking about Mississippi State. He only has one redshirt freshman starting between the top 22. So, you know, this is a roster besides the few grad transfers he has. I think he has 3 grad transfer starters, including Costello. But otherwise, he took that Mississippi State team as it was and turned it into this. One note I want to go through, guys, is everyone's trying to guess what the attendance and what COVID's happening. Well, let me just say this. There were 3 college football teams this past week, and that had over 20,000 people in the stands. A&M, oh yeah, they didn't do very well, squeaking by Vanderbilt 17-12. Oklahoma, oh, oops, they lose to Kansas State. LSU, oops, they lose to Mississippi State. So don't all of a sudden get excited with 20,000 people in the fans. Not that it's not going to help you, but we saw what happened this past week with the 3 teams that did have 20,000, 0 for 3 ATS. 2 of them lost outright as what? 28 and 11-point favorites. Looking at year-to-date so far, 2020, home teams ATS this year, 43.2%. Home teams the previous 3 years, the first 4 weeks, 50%. So home teams down almost 7% against the spread. Home favorites this year, 41% against the spread. Previous 3 seasons, 52% against the spread, so down 11 points. And home favorites of 7 or more, only 43.5% this season, 52.6%, so an 8% difference from this year to last. And when a team is a home favorite over the previous 3 years, they've been a 50% over-under. This year, over-unders for home favorites, only 41% to the over, 59% to the under. So things will change with more conference schedules, but clearly, home favorites, 43%, unders with home favorites, 59% to the under.
Good stats there, Ralph. And you bring up the home field advantage and the fans being in the stands, and you bring up those 3, with over 20,000. And I'm trying to take something from that, because watching the Monday Night Football, and I know this is the NFL, but still, I think that it does somewhat help the home field to have fans in the stadium. And I would almost want to take it to the next level, and I doubt you could actually just find this in a database. You'd actually have to go do it personally and then keep, proprietary records of this. But when the band is in the stadium, I think that actually might matter in college football towards home field advantage, because that Monday Night Football game with no fans in the stadium, Baltimore at home, that was pretty dreadful. I can't see that there's much of a home field advantage when that happens, Ralph.
Well, let's go through the other games real quick. Auburn had 17-5. They win 29-13. Texas Tech had 16-6. They covered. They were getting 17 against Texas.
Yeah.
They lose in overtime,
They
a
look
game
good.
they shouldn't have lost. Arkansas had 16-5. They played well against a new quarterback, till the very end. Oklahoma State beat West Virginia without Sanders. They had 14-6. Ole Miss did lose by 16 to Florida in
They were
Kiffin's
right in that,
debut.
though.
They had
Yeah.
13-9. Miami of Florida, the 12,800 sounded loud on Saturday night. Were you at the game?
I was not, but I do want to throw out there, Miami, that Hard Rock Stadium is if you've been to a game, they pump in too much crowd noise. That's fake noise. Yeah.
And then TCU, Missouri, and Baylor were the other teams with 11,000 or more. So that's everybody this past weekend that had over 11,000 fans in their stands.
Okay, so there was some wins there with teams looking fairly good, more than half of the ones you just named.
Yeah.
I would say. Okay. All right. Good stuff, Ralph. And guys, each and every Tuesday, I guess we're going to be going at 11 a.m. Pacific here going forward with the Best Damn College Football Show at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter, at Cal Sports LV on Twitter, and at Drew Martin Bets on Twitter, guys. We got the 3 games we're breaking down here: Texas A&M, Alabama, Auburn versus Georgia, and we got Navy and Air Force in an interesting handicap, plus best bets at the end. But we can get started here, guys. Number 13th ranked Texas A&M at number 2 ranked Alabama. We're seeing Alabama minus 17-point favorites here, Ralph. 51.5 being the total. Any interest in getting involved here with the number 2 team in the country laying 17 points at home?
Well, you look at Alabama, and they did what they do often. They get out to the early lead. They relax in the second half, and Missouri scores with 2 seconds to go to get the back door for some. I think if you bet it early, you had the win anyway, but the others, they got it close for the 38-19 final.
It hit the over on that touchdown too.
Yeah, I'm sure Alabama didn't want to give up 322 yards. You look at the stats. I mean, you only had a 92-yard edge. And I will say this, I did catch a lot of the A&M game, and Jimbo Fisher can say what the hell he wants, man. That was one disappointing ass A&M offense, and I was pretty high on A&M this year. And not saying they can't turn it around, but for them to put up 372 yards against Vanderbilt at home, finish with a 117-yard edge, and that's with 6.8 yards per carry. I mean, you have Kellen Mond in there. You have, Isaiah Spiller got 100. So if I tell you Isaiah Spiller is going to get 100 yards rushing, and you have Kellen Mond, and you're playing Vanderbilt at home, you think it's an easy win and cover. But, Vanderbilt slowed the pace. That frustrated them. I always look, whenever I have Alabama, there's 2 things to remember. Normally, Alabama is a better ATS team laying double digits on the road than at home. But that also can be said for Ohio State, and that also could be said for Clemson. And if we have a lot of new people watching the show, handicapping college football, this is not the NFL with your set rosters. Your travel rosters are in the 60s now. They've lowered them because of COVID. So when you go out and you are Alabama and you go on the road, you are taking 60 people. Well, you have 11 offensive starters, 11 defensive starters, 11 second string starters on offense, 11 on defense. There's 44 of your players. Add in 8 more special teams players, that's 52. That doesn't leave you a whole third string. So normally when you have a lead in the third and fourth quarter, you're playing second and third string guys. When you have a lead at home, you could have 110, 120 guys on your roster. You may be playing fourth and fifth string guys with a big lead. So that's just something to remember. Although it didn't work out with Alabama last week, I want our people to remember that. I do know this. I know Alabama gets out to a big lead, and I did play them last week in the first half, and that's the way I'll look at Alabama again. I am going to look to play Alabama in the first half. Mac Jones, we know, is established. Harris is going to be a running back that gets there. Their receivers are strong enough. I think Saban plays his starters full tilt first half, and then maybe get some guys some rest and not get them overtired like he has in the past. So this is a spot where I think Alabama jumps out. I will play him on the first half. I will not play him on the game. And then Mon may get hot and get some yards in the second half against this team. But for the next few weeks, I have Alabama first half circled.
What are you thinking here, Robbie, with Texas A&M versus Alabama?
Yeah, I'm going to go real quick to the handicapping 101 point that Ralph brought up during his analysis, because it's something I learned way back in the early 90s, maybe 1992, from the late, great Dave Malinsky. At that point in time, guys, travel squads for college football were exactly 60 players. And he used to drive the point home that road favorites with big leads couldn't just unload the bench. At home, you see Michigan back in those days with 105 guys on the sidelines where they could play everybody. But you can extend margin on the road if you're the superior team, because you can't go into that type of depth. Generally, your second string stays out there, and if your second string is better than the opponent's first string, there's no back door open for that opponent. So great point by Ralph. Between the early 90s and what's been reduced nowadays, they actually extended that travel squad a little bit, but it's back to where it used to be. And it's a great point for people to remember here as far as road favorites are concerned, especially superior road favorites. It's great doing this show because every time Ralph says something, it generates a new thought in my head. But the original thought, and he pointed at it a little bit when he said it was whatever ass type of offense he saw out of A&M last week. That wide receiving crew was a question mark coming in. This opt-out stuff for Texas A&M is getting to be a little bit of an annoyance for Jimbo Fisher, because they had a problem a couple of weeks ago when their top wide receiver, Jamon Osborne, opted out. He was the playmaker for this team on the perimeter. They had a young set of inexperienced set of wide receivers coming back. He was going to be the guy. He opts out. So then there's really nobody to turn to. And I think that showed up for Kellen Mond, the experienced senior guy. He's dealing with new timing, new rhythm, a lot of new stuff with this wide receiving core. And I was high on A&M too heading into this season, but you don't see, at least early on, the opportunity for explosiveness out of this team in the passing game. And when you play Alabama, you better have some ability to throw the ball down the field, because you're not going to go 80 yards by handing off against Alabama. So I think that's a difficulty for A&M early on here, Drew. Until they correct that, I'm not too thrilled with their offense. Defensively, they were fine, even though they've lost some people on the defensive side. They're now down 3 defensive backs from opt-outs. And remember when this opt-out stuff happened, because their top linebacker, Anthony Hines, followed Osborne and opted out as well. So you could argue, if you took Mond out of the equation, you could argue that they lost their best offensive player, or at least weapon playmaker, and they lost their best defensive player when they lost Hines. And you had a little friction inside this team because one of their starting D-backs, Leon O'Neal, went right to Twitter that night. And I forget the exact quote, but it was like, "Oh man, we see who loves ball," or whatever he said. But it was derogatory towards the guys who had opted out. So, Fisher has a couple more this week. He has a couple injuries now. This isn't the time to play Alabama. I was looking back at the schedule, the original schedule, and Georgia would have played Alabama in week 3 with their new air raid offense. Because of coronavirus, Georgia lucks out, they would have played Alabama. Georgia lucks out and doesn't play Alabama. Instead, A&M's the lucky team that gets to play Alabama this early. I don't know offensively that I would trust them against defense. A couple of notes from last week's game against Missouri. Missouri only has 248 yards total in that game. The final drive of the game, they put in their backup quarterback, Connor Baselick. He goes 74 yards with the team for the touchdown with Eli Drinkwitz calling timeouts the whole way, right up until the last play when he walked in on a pass play that wasn't there, and the quarterback walks in from 7 yards for the touchdown as time expired. As you guys both mentioned, Missouri covers, game goes over on that play. But up until that point, 10 drives, 248 yards, Missouri did 0 offensively, which is what you would expect against them. There was a weird handshake after the game between Drinkwitz and Saban. I think Drinkwitz trying to explain why he was calling timeouts and get his young team into the end zone, but Saban wanted to hear nothing of it. I like what Ralph said about Alabama first half, but in my opinion, I don't mind playing Alabama game here. I don't think there'll be a let up against A&M. He does let up against inferior squads. I don't think a West Division opponent like A&M is viewed as an inferior squad. I don't think Jimbo Fisher is viewed as a guy that he wants to let up on. I think Alabama goes all 60 minutes here, and to me, guys, they look like the superior team at this point of the season. So I don't mind laying 17 with that team.
Ralph, I think you wanted to get in a point here, but did want to ask your opinion. Robert in the chat box says, do you think A&M was sandbagging? Do you think they were holding anything back last week? I mean, in the second half with the close score, I would say no, absolutely not. You got to have the win. But maybe in the first half, were they holding something back?
I mean, if you watched Jimbo Fisher walk off at the first half, he told you every mistake they made. You're not sandbagging to make mistakes. And Kellen Mond, 6.8 yards per attempt. That's Drew. You and I could go out and average 6.8 yards per attempt. So no, it was just Robbie's great point about the receivers not being in sync. His top receiver caught 4 balls for 9.8. His second top receiver caught four balls for 10.0. So, it's not that at all. They just have a lot of issues. We're going to talk about more COVID dropouts when we get to Air Force, but it's when you're planning to have these kids here and you don't, it's semi-surprising. I'm just looking back, Robbie. You talked about Alabama versus good teams. I'm not calling out any player or not, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Alabama is only 3-8 since 2017 when they're laying 18 or less. That's a surprising number to me. I was expecting to see a good number because I believed you. Yeah. So since I looked up the number, I wanted to share the number. Again, it's not changing my play. It's not changing your play. But again, it's just always good to have all the information going into when we're talking about these games.
Guys, we can move on here. We got about 25 minutes left. We got Navy versus Air Force up next, Robbie. 1-3-1, 1-3-2, the rotation here, 6 p.m. Eastern kick. CBS Sports Network -7, -6.5. That's Navy laying on the road at Air Force here, 48 being the total. Any opinion in the option attack battle here?
Well, I think Ralph hinted at it, and let's just get right to it. I mean, you see the crazy line move in this game, and with Air Force, we have a situation that at the academy they refer to as turnbacks. The Mountain West announced that they were postponing their season for the fall. Cadets were given the option to take a leave for a semester if they wish to. Generally, from what I took from the article I read, it's generally granted to hardship players, but the football players were allowed to take the fall semester off and come back in the spring. And it actually would have helped those guys in 2 ways. They would have gotten to play the spring semester and the following fall semester, so they would have gotten an extra season of eligibility out of this. Well, here's the bottom line, guys. Mountain West comes back like everybody else, tail between their legs, and says, okay, we'll play too because everybody else is playing and we don't want to be left out. And now these kids who took turnbacks from Air Force can't come back to the team. What you have now is a team that has 0 defensive starters returning. The defense is brand new. They had 5 guys back. All 5 took turnbacks. All 5 are gone. They can't choose to come back. It's not allowed. Quarterback Donald Hammond Jr., who we remember being the star of this team offensively last year, thrown off the team back in mid-July. He's not in what they call good standing status as a cadet. When that happens, You're not allowed to represent the academy in any way, shape, or form off the field, so you don't have your quarterback. Now, instead, you have 3 guys vying for a job where all you have combined is 2 games played. Never mind 2 games started, 2 games played with 0 statistics whatsoever. Not a pass attempt, not a passing yard, nothing. So you're brand new at quarterback with this team. You have 3 offensive starters, 0 defensive starters. I personally, after I read the article, and we'll get to Ralph as well on this, but I had to drop Air Force by 14 points in my power rating. Or 13 points, excuse me. I think I gave 9 to the defense, 9 minus, and then 4 for minus Hammond and what is going to replace him in this game. And the line turned to Navy -6. Well, the bettors hit it even harder because when I looked last, I think Navy was 7, maybe 7.5. So I think there's been a little extra even put into that by bettors. It's hard to play Air Force here, Drew. It really is. They've got their hands full. I know it's Air Force. And let me say this. Because I went through their entire roster. They released a new roster last night. And I went through the entire roster just to see how many freshmen maybe they would have or how many are upper class. I'll say this, despite all of the inexperience, let's word it that way, inexperience that will be on the field, of their 12 offensive linemen that are available to them, all of them are juniors or seniors. So while they might not have played, they've been at the academy. They only have 25 total defensive players. That's like what you have in high school, 25 defensive players. 17 of those are juniors or seniors. So it's a difficult situation personnel-wise. You have Navy coming in off the high of their second half against Tulane. Remember, they get outgained 251-59 in the first half, come back with 27 straight in the second half, walk off real happy. Ken Niumatalolo, the head coach of Navy, he said, we're preparing as if it's Air Force. Losing 40 players off the roster, Drew, because of these turnbacks. Whether they're 40 players shy or not, they're still Air Force. They won't quit. I don't doubt that. But I'll tell you what, Troy Calhoun's got his hands full. It just becomes a question of whether or not you feel comfortable laying 7.5 with Navy. I think my power ratings indicated 6. So I may feel comfortable, with a 10-point Navy win here at the Air Force. It's a tough situation that these kids aren't allowed back.
Yeah, we're seeing offshore. There is a 6 out there, but it's mostly 6.5, 7s right now with Air Force catching that. And this was a huge move here, Ralph. Obviously, what Robbie said is pretty shocking here with 40 players. I'm surprised they couldn't, do something within house to let those players play if they wanted to. But hey, what are you thinking about betting this game?
I heard they were still trying, so you never know.
They are trying.
I mean, yeah, so there may all of a sudden there might be. This is Air Force. Your kids aren't going to McDonald's and eating Whoppers. They are ready to play if they can play, even if they didn't practice. So, and also let's remember this. I'm not making a point for Air Force, but you normally only return 9 or 10 starters on the Naval Academy because you're playing your seniors. You have plebes, then you make the varsity program, then you're in the varsity program for a few years, and you're an established player, and you move up, and when you're a junior or a senior, you play. Very few freshmen or sophomore ever see the field. So if anyone could prepare its Army, then, this number shocked me. I've talked to astute handicappers, and this one everyone scratches their head. College football teams that have played 2 games, this is their 3rd game, against an opponent playing their first game of the season. What number do you expect?
I'm waiting for something terrible, Ralph.
60%? 65? You have 2 games under your belt. You're playing your 3rd game against a team playing their first game. Since 2016, teams with 2 games played have covered 28%.
How about that?
The team playing their first game has covered 72% against the team playing their 3rd game. Now, that's not going to change mine. That's one of those angles that, boy, I'm watching these teams play, and a team playing their 3rd game, in my mind, has to have an advantage. Perhaps the line is that inflated. The average line is -18.1. So is Vegas overcompensating? It's only 17-10 straight up, but that 18-point line changes things. So, Niamato, I always screw up his name anyway. Ken N, the head coach, knows how he feels that second half against BYU on national TV. He will not embarrass this team. Doesn't mean they're not going to win by 14. Doesn't mean they're not going to win by 21. But I'll tell you what, if they have a lead, it's going to be run, run, run. He's not going to throw the ball and embarrass this Academy team on national TV. So that's another thing to remember when you're looking at this game. I still, with the player situation with not going on, I could only play Navy, but I am still not playing Navy just because of those other things in there. So it seems like there's value. I understand it, but the Academy games and knowing the defense, I tell you what, I do like the under. I was thinking about using the under as my best bet. I'll switch it up now and not use it, but the 48 total, this Academy has normally gone higher because they throw the ball because they're playing earlier in the season. The Army-Navy game has gone under, 22 straight times? I think 10 or 12 straight times, to be honest. But this is one of those situations where I think that under 48 is going to have a lot of value because Navy's going to run the ball, and we know what Air Force is going to do, especially without their quarterback and especially with a young offensive line.
Good stuff, guys. I mean, that's a fascinating handicap, the Air Force Navy game there. That one going at 6. We have our next game up at 7:30 before we get to best bets. And guys, remember, each and every Tuesday, $2 Tuesday at WagerTalk and sportsmemo.com. Top handicapper at both sites. Top play discounted to just $2. Check it out, WagerTalk and sportsmemo.com. Guys, we got Auburn versus Georgia, number 7 versus number 4 ranked teams here. Rotation number 153, 154, 7:30 Eastern kick on ESPN. Deep South's oldest rivalry here, Ralph. We're seeing 45 the total, -7. That's the Georgia Bulldogs laying between the hedges in Sanford Stadium here. Georgia has a lot of question marks, Ralph. Quarterback, I believe JT Daniels is cleared to play. Will he play? That remains to be seen. Plus the fact this total, Circa opened it in the high 30s. Now we're seeing 45. That's a strong move here with two good defenses. What are you thinking with Auburn versus Georgia?
Yeah, I still lean. I lean with the under. On Monday, Kirby Smart said that JT Daniels' knee injury has been cleared, and he would be available to play. So it sounds like they're going to make the change and they're going to go to him. And why wouldn't you? You have to remember, without JT cleared, how many snaps did Stetson Bennett get in August? Well, you were deciding between the Wake Forest transfer. You were deciding between JT Daniels, who's going to be your quarterback. And lo and behold, game 1, you had neither. So you're going to a guy who, I don't mind using a third string quarterback, but I guarantee you with 2 new quarterbacks in the Georgia system, he didn't get very many reps. So, that's why they looked slow against Arkansas. There was no question. The offense was slow. We saw what they did in the second half. Excuse me. They ended up with a 107-yard edge. I still think now JT Daniels gets his first start. Yes, it's at home. Yes, they're going to have some fans. Yes, he's taken a lot of snaps, and I'm sure he knows this offense. He's not putting up, just because he's a Pac-12 quarterback who transfers to the SEC, he's not going to put up 600-plus yards like Mississippi State does, because that's not the Georgia offense. They still want to run the ball. They ran the ball 42 times in game 1 against Arkansas. They passed the ball 47. Auburn, did they impress me? They made the big stand at half, kept Kentucky out, although Kentucky should have had that touchdown. I'm a little bit bitter because I had the Kentucky side last week. So, nothing worse than that 14-point swing when you should have had a touchdown and then, and then you get the interception, run it back. Although they called the touchdown back, that might have been a makeup call, you think, for missing that touchdown. I do like Auburn here. I think I like that Auburn was tested. Georgia wasn't tested against Arkansas. Georgia just played poorly against Arkansas. To me, Auburn was tested against a very good Kentucky team. So being tested is the key here, not how close the game was. Bo Nix doing what he had to do, 16 of 27, throwing downfield. Seth Williams going to be his go-to guy, 6 catches, 112 yards. They need to find someone that runs the ball better. Is it DJ Williams? Is it Shivers? Who knows who's going to get it? I lean Auburn. I lean the under. Neither is close to being a play for me, though.
Robbie, have at it, man. I got some thoughts on this. I'll get after it after you, man.
Yeah, again, you see me writing down notes there as Ralph talks in response to what he's saying. So let me go ahead and start with this, Drew. Yes, Auburn wins. Yes, Auburn covers. Auburn was unimpressive offensively. Auburn covers because in the fourth quarter, they get back-to-back touchdowns on drives of 27 and 23 yards that came, I believe, off of a turnover on downs by Kentucky and a fumble recovery. So 27 and 23-yard drives to get their separation, to get that cover. No knock on the defense because the defense, and Drew, remember, there were concerns about the defense, right? The defensive line lost a lot to the NFL. The secondary, all 4 starters were gone, although the 4 who moved up had a lot of experience among them, played pretty well. But I'll go to this. Let's start with Auburn's defense because that's the high point of their team. Opening drive of the game, Kentucky goes 11 plays, 93 yards. They score a touchdown right away. After that, Kentucky has 10 possessions for the remainder of the game. 9 of those 10 came up with 0 points. On those 9 drives, how about 4 punts, 2 fumbles, an interception, and 2 turnover on downs? So Auburn's D stood up pretty good, right? They gave up in between that 10-drive mix, they gave up 1 more touchdown. 5 of the last 7 Kentucky drives, which to me is more important because it's the first game and you want to see how teams go as the game develops, right? They get a little used to playing again. 5 of the last 7 Kentucky drives totaled 4 yards or less. So Auburn's defense I have no problem with. But the Auburn offense was not good. And granted, Kentucky's a good defensive team. They stand up at the line of scrimmage with Auburn. They outgained Auburn in this game. But still, when you're Auburn and you have 3 drives in the entire game that go for 35 yards or more against Kentucky, and now you're going to play Georgia's defense, I question Bo Nix, and I question that offensive line. Seth Williams, the wide receiver, came up big, but he's playing Georgia corners now. I just don't know that offense is going anywhere against the Georgia defense. Now, to the point about Georgia, who, let's face it, they were awful in the first half. Arkansas had a lead. They changed their quarterback. DeJuan Mathis, for what it's worth, guys, he was in that game for 6 drives, and those 6 drives totaled 39 yards. So he was not getting it done. Stetson Bennett comes in. But it's not what Georgia planned for in the offseason to have these guys. These were last-minute, plug-ins for the game when JT Daniels wasn't medically cleared. To the point of Auburn being battle-tested much more than Georgia in their first game, that's absolutely true. The counter to that would be, as a 27-point favorite with a brand new playbook, how much was Georgia trying to show without the quarterback that they want to execute that playbook? JT Daniels comes from USC's air raid. He's the guy most qualified to run this air raid. If they held anything back offensively and if they played vanilla-style offense, because of DeJuan Mathis making his first start ever, because of Stetson Bennett having to come in and take his place, maybe there's something that they open up in the playbook here against Auburn that they did not want to show. For me, that would be a consideration as well with JT Daniels getting the start here. If he doesn't get the start, you can throw that out the window because I don't think they'll advance the playbook with either one of the other 2 guys. But with Daniels, I wouldn't be surprised if Monken shows a little more against this Auburn defense. Kind of trust Georgia a little more because they've got a little more in the wide receiving crew with Pickens and company. They've got more chance for explosive plays. And I just have to, still take a negative approach to Auburn's offense against this style defense, knowing that last week, one more time, they only had 3 drives over 35 yards against Kentucky. Kentucky's good defensively. They're not Georgia good. And for me, that would be a red flag on the Auburn side. We'll see how Bo Nix and that offensive line get it done this week. Maybe they do. But for now, I think I would have slight lean Georgia.
Yeah, Robbie, just to follow up on what you were saying, I've had questions about Bo Nix for a while now. Last year I thought he was people were giving him a little bit too much hype, just because he was a freshman. And I think, it's still yet to be seen if he can really perform at this level. But the defense, talking about Auburn's defense, and I was like you, man. I had real big questions up front. Both of their defensive tackles gone in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft. How much is that going to take away? I actually was very impressed with Auburn's defense watching that game against Kentucky. You just went over it. I mean, after that first drive, they really shut Kentucky down. And it's not like Kentucky has a really flashy offense, but I think that there's something to be said for that happening against an SEC opponent. Where I really have questions, though, is the Georgia side. I mean, I don't think they look good at all against Arkansas. And I know it got close to the number, but really I feel like Arkansas was the right side taking all those points. The Georgia offense, I don't think looked good at all. And now JT Daniels coming in, taking his first snaps in a new system. That's kind of a fade situation for me anyway. So I don't necessarily love putting money on Bo Nix and company. But really, that Auburn defense, I think, is going to play very, very well against Georgia. I like Auburn here. And I was like, Ralph, going into it, I picked every SEC team. It's not like I bet a lot on it, but I was on Kentucky, going there. And I felt like it was actually the wrong side. I guess I'm kind of different from both of you guys. I forgot, how good Auburn has recruited over the last 4 or 5 years. It's top. It's, top 10 here. And you see that because Kentucky, everybody's talking about how good they recruited, but it's nowhere near where Auburn was. And I remember Ralph making that point, jumping from, 6 nationally to 25 nationally. That's a big jump. That's not like 40 to 55. And I thought that was a great point by Ralph. In Auburn's one of those teams. I don't know if I would really look to fade them, guys. Not sure if you have any follow-up before we get to best bet.
No, I mean, I respect your Auburn opinion. To be honest with you, I was disgusted that Kentucky didn't get in, and I turned the game off and switched to another game. We know how much momentum there is going to a halftime. If Kentucky scores that touchdown and Auburn goes in down to Kentucky, how much does that change the mental fortitude of the team in the second half? So, that's a question we'll never know, but it's always something I'm thinking about.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Well, we got best bets here. Rob Veno at Rob Veno Sports, Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV. Check them both out at WagerTalk.com. Also, $2 Tuesday at both WagerTalk and Sports Memo here, guys. But we do got best bets. Robbie, you want to lead us off with what you're looking at, what you suggest for your best bet for the show?
Yeah, I'm trying real quick here to look, Drew. I know we won again last week. The 3 games that we talked about. What did we have? We had Auburn, Kentucky. Oh, we had Miami and Florida State over as the play here last week. So 3-0 first 3 weeks on the show, best bets. So we hope to move that up to 4-0. And I'm going to go back to the game before that we talked about, SEC matchup between Alabama and Texas A&M. And I really, as I said earlier, I don't have a problem laying the 17 with Alabama at this point in the season. I think when Texas A&M figures out if they have playmakers on the perimeter and how they can get the ball downfield, maybe I would think differently. But right now against this Alabama defense, I can't. Mon's going to be under some pressure. Ralph mentioned that they're not even attempting to throw the ball down the field. If you can't loosen up the Alabama defense and they can creep 8 or 9 inside 5-7 yards of the line of scrimmage, you're in trouble. And Alabama doesn't have that problem. They're going to stretch the A&M defense with their wide receiving core. 1 game under the belt here for a new season for Mac Jones, like him at quarterback. Just think if I went down position grouping for these 2 teams right now, straight down the line, Alabama's the better team. And I don't foresee a let up. I know that the ATS numbers this play might fly in the face of those Alabama ATS numbers. But I still don't think there's going to be a let up here. I don't think he's going to let Jimbo Fisher off the hook. And I think Jimbo Fisher, Ralph mentioned he was frustrated at halftime. I saw that press conference yesterday when he announced the injuries and the new COVID opt-out. He looks frustrated heading into practice week. Not a good sign for me. Saban might have a little bit of a, bug up his hiney because of what Missouri did to end the game to him. I don't know that he'll let that happen again. Give me Alabama minus 17. I can see that ending somewhere in the vicinity of like 34-13, 34-10.
All right, Bama minus 17 for Robbie Veno. Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports LV on Twitter. What do you got for best bets, bud?
You guys know I love trends. I love facts. I love numbers. And I'm going to throw out two crazy trends here. But I do want to preface it by saying this, guys. I tell you often, never bet a game on a trend or a system or an angle. It can make a game stronger. Well, I lean this way. And then I like both of these trends. And I wanted to share these trends. So therefore, I have to use this as a best bet. So I'm going to ask you guys. First 4 games of the season. You're at home and you lose by 1, 2, or 3 points. So you're off a close loss. What do you do the next game? Do you cover 71% or cover 29%?
Are you home again?
More.
It doesn't matter where you are. All you are is off a close home loss, games 1 through 4.
Wow. Does it
71% is the cover, 67 and 27. So that's going back to 2013. So we have a 7-year sample size. I will tell you, Georgia State, Oklahoma, and TCU fit into that bill. Okay? So my best bet is one of those 3. Now let me give you another angle. What happens if you allow 50 points and win, and now you're a home favorite? So let's see. Oklahoma didn't allow 50. Georgia State didn't allow 50. So TCU scored 50 points and lost, right? That was the Texas game back and forth in overtime. Crazy game. So this applies
that was
Texas Tech.
Right? I'm sorry. You right. This angle is anti-Texas. My apologies. TCU's playing Texas this week. And now I'm talking too much and confusing people. So first angle is this. Off a close home loss, teams are 71% like TCU.
Okay.
Teams that allow 50 points and win like Texas.
Mm-hmm.
When they're a home favorite, going back to 2004, they are 1-15 against the spread.
Wow. TCU's the play.
So I've got a 71% angle on TCU. I think they're going to improve. We've seen Texas's defense is not improved. When you allow 50 points or more and win the game, and you're a home favorite the next game, you're 1-15 ATS. That is 7.7%. I'm going to grab the 2 touchdowns with the TCU Horned Frogs.
All right, looking towards TCU. And what was the best number you can get, bro?
I have 13. It's moved around. And as you give yours, Drew, I'll look it up.
On the Sports Memo WagerTalk odds screen, looks like
across
13.
The board. Yep.
Yeah. So TCU plus 13 for Ralph. Rob Veno on Alabama minus 17. I'll pull mine up here. We got best number is Ole Miss versus Kentucky, 145, 146. I'll make mine a little simpler here, Ralph. Ole Miss, I know that they did not win, did not cover against Florida, but if you watch that game, they were right with them, and they definitely could have covered there towards the end. 2-point conversion away from it. I was impressed by how they stood up to the Florida Gators, which I think is a legit top 5 team in the country. Kentucky in the exact opposite direction. I was not impressed with how they went up against Auburn and the more highly recruited Auburn team here. So asking Kentucky to lay a touchdown here, and I see that the market has taken out the 7s, which does give me some optimism in that I'm seeing where the market is pushing this. However, I would rather have gotten the 7. But either way, I like Ole Miss to actually go into Lexington and come out with the victory. So if you want to sprinkle a little bit there on the money line, but for the best bet, I will take the Ole Miss Rebels plus 6.5 against Kentucky for my best bet.
Drew, question for you. I know you're a South Beach guy. Do you have a man crush on Lane Kiffin? Is that really it?
That's a funny point. I told you this story that he I mean, I guess to answer your question, yes, but when he drove his boat to the coaches show in Boca Raton, I was like, man, that is the coolest thing. If I could ever get a job like that. And so yes, I do. And I like how he calls the plays. He's got two quarterbacks that I think are really good, and I think Ole Miss is underrated in itself. But yeah, to answer your question, I thought you were going somewhere with the Miami Hurricanes because I'm really high on them as well.
No, not at all.
We're a week away from that. Any thoughts here on are the Canes for real when they go to Clemson next week?
I think there's no question at this point.
Yes, relative. I think I clearly think they now. Actually, I have them, I think, tied with North Carolina as the number. Actually, I have them number 3 because I still have Notre Dame ahead of them in the ACC this year. And then I have them in North Carolina basically tied in that 3rd spot behind Notre Dame.
Okay. Robbie, any quick thoughts?
Yeah, very, very quickly. I just wanted to point out, because Ralph, when his play came with TCU, anybody who saw the ending of that game, oh my God, that's a game that moved from 2.5 to 4 and probably shredded and cashed as many tickets on it in 20 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes, because Texas Christian scores on the last play of the game on a deep pass play from about 30 yards out to close the gap to 3. Now, if you're taking 2.5, you're like, I'm going to cover because they're going to kick the extra point. They're going to lose by 2. Gary Patterson proceeds to just concede the extra point and doesn't kick it. So people who laid 2.5 get off the hook and cover that game. People who took 2.5 don't cover. People who laid a late price get beat on the last play of the game because TCU only loses by 3. So those of you laying 3.5, 4, 4.5, all rip up your tickets. I mean, that was the craziest ending. But Patterson was given the option, and he chose not to kick that extra point. So that kind of either made people very, very happy or very, very PO'd at the same time.
We know that the Big 12 football program is not sponsored by DraftKings.
Yeah, but I thought they had the rule in college football and college basketball to play the whole game. That's why you'll see them do that in both sports. And sure enough, it's the option of the head coach that scores the touchdown?
It must be a conference thing because I believe the Big 10 plays it out now. And so, yeah, weird times.
Weird times indeed, and it's costing people money or making people money, whichever way you want to look at it. But guys, great show. Started a little shaky, but finished strong, I thought. And guys, best bets: Alabama minus 17, TCU plus 13, and Ole Miss plus 6.5. So 2 underdogs, 1 favorite here, guys. Hopefully go 2-1, if not 3-0. But for Rob Veno at Rob Veno Sports on Twitter, Ralph Michaels at Cow Sports LV on Twitter. I am Drew Martin at Drew Martin Bets on Twitter. Guys, check them out. WagerTalk.com, SportsMemo.com. It is $2 Tuesday. Check it out at both sites. Best of luck with your bets, guys.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks, Rob.